Greetings and felicitations. This is Michael Haspel. Welcome to a new QFD. This one's going to be about distraction-free writing and deep immersion. I'll do it in two parts. The first part will be on deep immersion and how to get readers into that kind of mind state. And the second part will be more about the tools you can use as a writer to help you maintain that kind of a deep immersion, getting in the zone, etc. So without further ado, let's get into it. Part 1, Deep Immersion. So recently I took a course from the late Dave Farland, and he was talking about deep immersion. And it was something that, even though I didn't know exactly what he was talking about, I kind of did. Just as he started describing it, I was like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And he was talking about how writers can bring worlds to life and the tools that they use to do that. Emotions, actions, sounds, sights, smells, tactile sensations. We can actually look into characters' thoughts. And that's kind of why everyone always says, oh, you should read the book. The book was so much better, right? So as a writer, you're a transmitter. Like the act of writing and reading is as close to telepathy as we can kind of get. It's kind of magic, right? Is I can have thoughts. I can put symbols on a device or on some kind of recording thing, medium, have somebody come and decipher those symbols and have thoughts very similar to mine, if I've done my job correctly. And so as a transmitter, you're sending out signals as a writer. And if you send out bad signals, the reader is going to get bad signals. They're going to receive static. So it is really, really important for the writer and the reader to kind of get on the same wavelength, and so if the writer imagines well and is able to convey that, then the reader's neurons fire in sympathy and the reader, imagines well. So if you're given a weak description, then the reader has a weak response. But the better the description, the stronger the reader responds, right? And it turns out that this actually maps to brainwaves. So normally we're in the beta state or beta waves, right? And that's just normal waking consciousness thinking, like pretty much what we're in right now. Reading, by just the act of reading, of immersive reading, of not just looking at a text or something like that, that actually slows your brainwaves down. And it starts to make you physically and mentally relaxed. You're awake, but maybe a little drowsy, but you're mentally receptive, and it's a pleasant state to be in, right? So that's called the alpha state. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, in more depth. But part of getting into that alpha state is something that's called the voluntary suspension of disbelief, right? Where you know that something is not accurate or not true, but you can suspend disbelief enough to go, oh yeah, in the context of this story, this happens, which is fundamental to the importance of established canon. And that's a whole other QFD for another time. But long story short, the more a storyteller violates canon, the harder it becomes for the audience to suspend disbelief. And that goes for all storytelling. And it just seems like a lot of storytellers nowadays think that canon doesn't matter. And so they just go, we'll just change whatever we want to suit whatever we want, whatever message we want to append to this story. And that really harms their storytelling, and it seems like they don't care. But anyway, I don't want to go down that road. That's like I said, that's a whole other podcast for another time. But writers need to be able to paint a picture with words. Words are all we have to like really work with. We don't have a soundtrack most of the time. We don't have, we don't have the visceral pictures or whatever that film can bring us and television can bring us. So, an interesting side note on this is that if you put some people, there's been experiments where they put people in an MRI and had writers try to write in an MRI, write very vivid passages, and they had readers read them while they were in the MRI. And an interesting thing happened. It's that if they wrote a passage about running and they described it very well, then both the writer and the reader experienced an area where the same parts of the brain that would light up if they were actually running actually lit up, not as intensely, but it was the same parts of the brain. Like if they were reading a passage that was very intensive about running, that was very descriptive or whatever, same parts of the brain would light up. So that's really cool. And there's like a caution here too. That's one of the reasons you don't want to use cliches, because cliches lack that punch. They lack that originality. So the brain just sees the cliche and it doesn't really associate an action or a behavior with that, right? And so if you if a reader is reading about, say, driving really fast or being really intense on any activity, right? That is actually affecting the brain and driving a physical response. They saw people's heartbeats like increase during really intense passages, stuff like that. And anecdotally, if you want to do this experiment yourself, and see how words can drive a direct physical response, go read a well-written passage from the erotica genre and see what happens. But anyway, when you go to creating a perfectly vivid scene, it puts the reader and the writer in the alpha state, right? And that state becomes symbiotic. So if the writer is in the alpha state, or even deeper in the theta state, right, which is the state of like deep meditation, where, and I know if you're a writer out there, you'll know what I'm talking about, where the world around you seems to disappear, and your fingertips know that you're typing on a keyboard, but you don't really notice it. You're not really thinking about trying to see the keys or what letter comes next. The words are just flowing out of you. What a lot of writers refer to as the zone, right? If you're in that zone, chances are whoever's reading that passage will also get into that zone. So that is a very important state to get into. And in my critique group, I'll hear people say something like, hey, this is the part that pulled me out, right? And that's what they mean by that. They're talking about how they were in the story, the mortal world, the common world, the real world had disappeared. It was gone. They were fully into your story, and then they ran into a passage or maybe a fact or something, hey, you said earlier, I could have sworn you said this guy had green eyes before, right? And it re-engages that beta state of the brain. It re-engages the logic center, and they get pulled out of the fantasy, out of that willing suspension of disbelief. So you want to keep the reader in that alpha or theta state as long as possible, because you want them to feel like they lived through your story, right? Stephen King also talks about this a little bit on writing. But what you need to do then is set up for a number, like a checklist, right? Is you want to set up, you want to be precise. So specificity. So just a quick example, it's not a wooden table, it's an oak table, right? Something like that. Or it's not a sword, it's a rapier. Just the more specific you can make things, that elicits a more definitive, image in your reader's mind and helps them remain immersed. Step 2, you want to be vivid, right? You want to describe things with size and color, involve all the senses. You want to have emotion, you want to have sound, you want to have sight, smell, taste, touch, kinesthetic sense. How do things feel? Are they off balance? Are they, is it itchy? Is it, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. The more you can do that, the better it is. But you have to be a little bit careful there too, right? You don't want to be stacking a whole ton of adjectives on top of something. And don't overuse adverbs. These are just, standard like 101 kind of stuff. And be aware of purple prose, of overwriting stuff. And so now we're going to get into part 2. And I know part 1 went really quickly, but part 2 might go quickly too. This might only be like a half-hour QFD because there's only so deep I can get into this stuff without doing a whole dissertation. So the tools to achieve distraction-free writing, obviously, if you want to be deeply immersed, you want to keep distractions to a minimum. And that includes while you're writing. Because as we talked about, if you're in that alpha state, chances are your reader's going to get into that alpha state. And I've noticed in my own writing that when I'm in that zone, I generally don't get a whole lot of feedback or critique for those sections. Those sections come back from my editors or from my critique group, or from my wife who edits a bunch of my stuff, very clean. Maybe a word here or there, because they've been drawn into the story and they're not noticing stuff. And I found that when I'm critiquing other people's works and they are in that zone, because I'll get in that zone, I'll get lost in the story and I'll forget. I'll have to remind myself constantly, I'm supposed to be critiquing this. I'm supposed to be looking for ways that this can improve. And I'll have to remind myself constantly about that. So, but that's a good thing. You don't want your reader proofreading your stuff. You want your reader living your story, being in your world. So there are some tools to achieve distraction-free writing. And some of them are just mental, disciplinary tools, and some of them are physical tools. And today we're going to talk a little bit about both, but mostly about the physical ones, right? So I've kind of set up some criteria on what I would like out of a distraction-free writing tool, right? So the number one criteria for me is, as a professional writer, you cannot afford to lose work. I mean, as a writer, period, losing work is a nightmare. It is, it is the worst thing. I would not wish that on my worst enemies. It is absolutely terrible to lose work. But as a professional, you're up against a deadline or something like that. Losing work costs you money. It could cost you future work. It could cost you your career, right? So it is paramount that you have backup. Whatever we pick has got to have redundancy. The second criteria is that it should be convenient to use, right? It should be something that's pleasant to use, that you want to use, that you want to break out. Because every obstacle, every writer out there knows this, every obstacle that you can get to put in the way between you and your writing, that will try to talk you out of your writing. You know what I mean? So you need to make things as obstacle-free as you can. It's kind of like going to the gym. You know what I mean? Just get up and go, but oh, well, I have to walk the dogs, I have to do this, I have to go shopping, I have all these other things start to intrude, and then pretty soon you haven't done what you've set out to do. So it needs to be convenient. The third one is that I would prefer if it was portable, right? So that you could take it wherever you need to go. If you have 10 minutes where you're sitting at a coffee shop or or waiting to pick up your kids or whatever. You should be able to like maybe knock something out like that. And then the fourth criteria is starts to get a little bit harder. It should be cheaper than what you could buy a good laptop for. And when I mean a good laptop, I'm not talking about some Alienware gamer laptop, right? I'm talking about just a decent laptop, decent work laptop, right? So solution number one, and if you're on a budget, is a laptop because it's a one-stop shop, right? It does other things than just write. And ultimately, we have to look at, if you're a professional or want to be a professional, the publishing industry uses Word and or Google Docs, but mostly Word, right? So that has to be the end state. And if you're an indie, you can use other stuff like Vellum or Atticus, which I haven't used yet. It's kind of new, but it looks really cool. But still, we're going to set our criteria that Word or Google Docs is going to be the end state of this before you convert it into an EPUB or a Mobi file. And if you're doing it trad, it basically has to be in Word. A DocX is kind of the standard. So the laptop has a lot of pros. And when I say laptop, I also am including like a Chromebook, that kind of thing, right? It can be used for multiple things. You can back up to your heart's content. You can back up to a thumb drive, so SD cards, whatever. To the cloud. they almost always have Wi-Fi. But the con on the laptop is that it's a power drain. If you can't get to an outlet, you're definitely, that's a limiting factor, right? The clock is ticking if you cannot get to an outlet. So that might be fine if you can get to an outlet daily. But if you're somewhere where you can't get to power daily, say you went on a retreat or something like that, and it's up in the woods in a cabin or whatever, you don't have electricity for whatever reason, you're kind of hosed. So you're limited on clock time, and even the most economical laptops are going to get you, you're not going to get 20 hours of battery life. You're getting 10, right? So that's what we're looking at there. But one of the cons is it can be used for a lot of things. And that's kind of bad when you're going for deep immersion. And I just want to, there's been a study, I think it was from the University of California, that talked about every time you get distracted, it can take you anywhere from 10 to 25 minutes of uninterrupted work before you're working at the same capacity as you were before. Isn't that crazy? Right? And some of these, and they have caveats for it. You can look it up. But they have caveats for it. Like if the interruption isn't connected to the work that you're doing. So that say you were doing work, you're deeply immersed, you're thinking about the scene, you get up to refill your coffee and then sit back down. That doesn't count as an interruption because it's like a different act, right? It's not keeping you from thinking about the scene. But if your phone rings and now somebody wants you to talk about your car insurance, your warranty on your car insurance and everything, well, that just broke your train of thought and it could take you 10 to 25 minutes. And I'm reminded of that scene in The Shining where Jack Nicholson's going off on Wendy because she came into the room while he was typing. Now, granted, he was going insane, but that scene came directly from like Stephen King being frustrated by the same thing because it took him too long to get back into the zone when he was working on it, and he just made it super extreme with Jack Torrance going completely ballistic. Also, so how do you deal with distractions on the laptop? There's a couple of ways. Number one is you turn off the Wi-Fi. But if you turn off the Wi-Fi, you lose your cloud backup. So that that instant backup on, say, like Scrivener or something like that, where you don't have to worry about it and it's backing up to Dropbox, so it's not on your laptop, so that if something happened to your laptop, you still have your work. Without the Wi-Fi, can't do that. There are other distraction-free apps you can use. I've thrown on like Stay Focused. It's an extension for Chrome where it'll block your social media. It'll block whatever website you put in, right? So and you can set it up so that you only can get like a certain amount of social media time during the day, or you can have it just block any social media site at all. So you can't even check it. Another successful way, I've had more success with this doing my day job writing than fiction writing, but I use the Pomodoro method. And it's like 25 minutes of, you kind of make a promise to yourself that for 25 minutes you're not going to do anything else but this task. And you're not going to allow yourself to be interrupted. And then at the end of the 25 minutes, you give yourself a 5-minute break where you can do whatever you want. And then engage another 25 minutes. And you do that another 2 times, and then you can take a 15-minute break and do whatever you want. And it'll be surprising how fast you can burn through a task doing things that way. And they sell 20, the easy way is just set a 25-minute timer and it just goes off. But if you wanted to be more tactile or whatever, they have 25-minute hourglasses, and that's what I use. I just flip it over, and once that's flipped over, I'm doing one task at a time. But self-discipline is the key, because if you're working on like a laptop with access to the internet, it's so easy to just go, oh, I'm just going to pop in and check one thing, right? Or I have bookmarks for name generators where I just make name banks or whatever, but I come up with a new character. I'm like, oh no, I need to know who this person is. What's the name of that guy's wife? So I'll pop into the name bank or whatever. But then it's really, really, really easy, because social media works on habit loops, and they have been conditioning us for years. So as soon as you've opened up that first tab, how easy is it to pop open your Gmail and check on that? Or Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram, or whatever. And the next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole, and a good chunk of your writing time is just gone, right? So there are some distraction-free writing things for software, for laptops. Scrivener has one. I'm assuming Atticus has it. I just briefly looked at the features because it is new. Word actually has a distraction-free writing mode, but I think it is only for the Mac. And I don't know if Google Docs has it, because I don't use Google Docs that much. I use Word. There are websites like, I think it's called Writer. It's the internet typewriter. And it's at bighugelabs.com. You can go check that out. It's free to use. It backs up stuff, but one of the things I don't like about it is that it is a web interface, right? So you have to have your browser open to just use it, and that precludes you from saving to your local hard drive. So I don't like it for that reason. That I'm not sure how its backups work. I'm not crazy about it. So it's easy to lapse on a laptop, but if you're on a budget and you can only afford really one writing tool, then the laptop's got to be it, because you can edit on it. You can do everything you need to do given a laptop, right? It's a one-stop shop. And before I launch into some of the other tools, I want to talk about one that's kind of weird, and it's dictation, right? I haven't had a lot of success with this because it takes a lot of work for you. You essentially have to relearn patterns. Just like you're used to typing words, you now have to be used to removing that kind of filter of talking so that you can narrate it. And I would recommend a book. I think it's called On Being a Dictator, and it's written by Kevin Anderson and Martin Shoemaker. and they have done a fantastic job with this book. But when I listen, like Kevin Anderson has a sample at the end of the book. He gives you a link to a sample of a book that he was currently writing, which is actually now published, and it's crazy. He sounds like an audiobook. And I could never get to that level yet. I'm still trying, but it works well for me just to talk it out, to like kind of create an outline or a synopsis. But I can't describe the book as if I was writing. And I guess that takes a lot of work and a lot of practice, like everything else in life. So, and I know there's probably a couple people out there that when I'm talking about tools for distraction-free writing, they're like, oh, just use a pen and a piece of paper, duh, right? And it's like, okay, we'll entertain that. And it's like, I do carry a notebook with me everywhere I go, and I have different pens too. So it's like, and a quick aside there, for my money, my favorite pen at the moment is a medium point S gel pen by Sharpie. It doesn't smear. It tends to stay around and writes very, very well. Really, really nice pen. And then my favorite notebook or journal is the Large Primo journal from Piccadilly. And I like their open bound journals too. They online, they're not pricey. I mean, they're just notebooks and journals. But if you go to Barnes and Noble and look on like their discount aisle kind of stuff, they usually have some of those journals there, and you can scoop them up real cheap. And that's usually what I do. I go there and I buy 3 or 4 at a time. The benefits, of course, of pen and paper: it's convenient, it's portable, it's cheap. There is no backup. And so I'm just like, I'm a little wary because I have spilled coffee on a notebook and had the pleasure of trying to decipher what the ink said originally, right? Oh, so you could just use pencil. True. And there's actual real benefits to writing fiction longhand. It engages a different part of your brain than typing does. But workflow wise, it's kind of problematic. And the reason I say that is it means that you have to transcribe everything that you wrote longhand now, back into a computer at some point to get to Word, to get to that final end state, right? Because I don't think OCR has gotten good enough to read people's chicken scratchings and convert that text 1-to-1 perfectly. It doesn't work. But there are some times where you may want to write longhand. When I get stuck on a particular scene and I want to tap into that creativity a lot more, I will write it out longhand in cursive, and that usually gets the muse out of bed, for whatever reason. But there is no backup. So if you lose your notebook or your journal, it would be a complete disaster to a deadline. So that's not really viable. But there is a solution for that. Solution number 1, something called a smart pen. Well, it's a pen that records what you write. And there are a bunch of different models out there, but for my money, my favorite right now is the Live Scribe Aegis. And that's an older model. It's been discontinued. You can still pick them up on eBay and everything like that. It's not that old. I think their current main model is called the Symphony, and it retails for about $100. And how it works is you write with the pen on special paper notepads that they sell, and it records what you write. And it can sync in real time with your smartphone and syncs the audio. It can record audio, and it syncs the audio with what you're writing, right? And then from there, the app can make a PDF, a MP4 video, or and it syncs with Evernote or OneNote. And there's a desktop app too, so you're not just confined to your phone. In theory, it does do some handwriting recognition, but Not really. I haven't had a whole lot of success with that, and my handwriting is actually pretty neat. Unless I write in block letters, it won't really translate it to text. Um, so what about like some digital paper solutions, like the Remarkable 2, Remarkable Books Note, or even just a tablet with a really good stylus, like an iPad with the pencil. I've kind of left them out. Now I have a Remarkable 2, and I really like it, but these are still really pricey. Once the price starts to come down, I think they will be really viable. I use my Remarkable 2 all the time, but I don't write fiction on it. I use it for my day job. And it works extremely well. But again, you're dealing with the handwriting recognition it'll do all this. It really doesn't unless you're writing in block letters. And if you insist on writing, longhand, I don't know that they're a good solution for fiction. And again, it increases that workflow again. You know what I mean? You'd have to transcribe everything to text at some point to put it into Word or Google Docs. So you're adding an additional step. Now, there's a third tool, been around a long time. Writers have loved it for a long time, and that is the humble typewriter, right? So the typewriter has some of the previous backups of a pen and paper problem, right? There's no backup. You have one physical copy, and that's it. And if you're not a really great typist, it's not really a help. But again, now with the typewriter, you can actually find a scanner with good OCR that will just scan it in, and you're into Word, right? And it'll probably have some minor errors, whatever, but those should be easy to fix. It wouldn't be that big a deal. So you can back that up. There's just an additional step to backing it up. So you can't edit on a typewriter, but that's secretly a good thing, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you can put it into a computer using some kind of scanner. So that does work. And I do know authors, professionally published, traditionally, and indie, right, who have had really good success, who actually do both. I know writers that write longhand in a notebook with a pen and paper, and I know people that write their entire first drafts on typewriters, and then get it scanned in, or get somebody else to retype it or something. And Kevin Anderson, when he does his dictation, he employs a dictation service to actually listen and type in all of his stuff. So those are actually viable solutions. And a lot of the folks that I know that write longhand with a pen and paper, and the other folks that write on a typewriter, they use their typing into Word as their second draft edit. Like they've incorporated that as their second draft. So that works, right? But what if we could have a word processor that was like cheap, robust, convenient, portable, worked with modern tech, so you didn't have to transcribe or re-enter our work into Word or Google? Well, and what if it gave you battery life, like really good battery life? I'm going to talk about two devices here. And I'm sure there are more out there, but the two I'm going to talk about because they're readily available. And they are both made by a company called Alphasmart. Now, the Alphasmart line of word processors are essentially like small digital typewriters that just do word processing. They don't do anything else. They were used extensively in schools in the late 90s and early 2000s. They do have full-size keyboards, and they're the keyboard is actually really nice. It's comparable to a ThinkPad keyboard from Lenovo, and they have some of the best laptop keyboards around. They're not the little chiclet keys. They actually have good tactile feedback and everything like that. Because frankly, when you're going to be knocking out a 100,000 word novel, keyboard becomes more important than you'd think. And both the Alphasmarts that I'm going to talk about have great keyboards. Personally, there are a lot of Alphasmarts out there, and I should get out of the way that they were made by a company called Renaissance Learning, which is now defunct. All the Alphasmarts have been discontinued. They are relics of the past. And personally, I wouldn't buy any model earlier than the Alphasmart 3000. All the Alphasmarts sport a very small screen. So although you can edit your text on there, you don't want to, because you can only see a few sentences at a time, right? So that increases your focus. But price-wise, they can't be beat. So we're going to narrow it down and talk about the Alphasmart Dana and the Alphasmart Neo and Neo 2. And for the purposes of this discussion, then I'm just going to refer to it as the Neo, because they're pretty much identical. Like the Neo has different colors, is a different color. It's like a dark kind of green. The Neo 2 is a gray and has a slightly more memory there, but they're pretty much identical. So you're going to have to go on eBay to get these. The Dana sells for between $60 and $90. The Neo sells between $35 and $60. Yeah, that's the ticket, right? $35. The price has been creeping up on the Neos as more and more writers find out about them and scoop them up, because they are a finite resource. Occasionally there'll be a whole pallet of them that gets uncovered from some school, like emptying out a storage unit or something like that, and they'll flood eBay with it, and it'll be amazing. So both of them have LCD screens. Both have keyboards that are really, really good. Like I said, comparable to the Lenovo ThinkPad notebook. The screens on the Neo are really easy to read, high contrast. On the Dana, it has a touch-sensitive component to it because it can use a stylus. So it's not as high contrast as the Neo and can be harder to read depending on what lighting you're in. Both transfer their data into a computer by using a USB cable. So actually, when you plug it into a computer, even a smartphone, it can recognize it as a USB keyboard. And then when you press the send key, it basically retypes all your words at a really, really high rate of speed into whatever software you want, because it gets recognized as a USB keyboard. So that's pretty much done, right? Not quite. So the Neo has no innate built-in backup capability. So if you want to back up, you have to plug it into another device. Now, the Neo happens to have a battery in there that it won't lose all of its data if it loses power, but that's not even a problem. The Dana, if it loses power, its memory gets wiped. So that's kind of a problem. There's a hack out there where you can string like an Apple Lightning to USB camera adapter and an unpowered USB hub, and then plug the Neo into that, and the iPhone recognizes the Neo as a USB keyboard. And then from there, you can open up your writing app and just hit send, and it does everything the way it would do on a computer. I don't know if that works for Android devices. But there's also a similar method using a Bluetooth converter, and it's available from handheldsci.com. That's handheldsci.com. There's no battery in the adapter, though, so now you need a power bank to power the adapter, but then it turns any keyboard, including the Neo and the Dana, into a USB keyboard, which once again, you pair with your phone, send in the app of choice, it backs up to your phone, and then the phone, using regular cellular data, can back up to the cloud. So that's how you get your backup. But it sounds like That sounds like more work than it is, honestly. And I'm really, really paranoid about losing work because that's happened to me in the past and it really sucks. So it's not ideal, which brings us back to the Dana. Like the Neo holds about 200 pages of text on its own, but the Dana, you don't really need to worry about how many pages it holds because the Dana has internal memory, right? But it also can back up to 1 or 2 SD cards. So you can back up locally. And the Dana gives you about 22 hours of battery life, right? Which is better than a laptop. And you can recharge the Dana, we'll talk about that in a little bit, through a USB power bank. You don't need an outlet. So the Dana is effectively rechargeable. And that's a really good thing. But we'll come back to that, right? Because I need to interject. If you do buy a Dana or a Neo, there's one setting that you need to change like right away, and it just will make your life a lot better. So go into the configuration settings and turn on 2-button option. And that means that you have to press both on and enter keys simultaneously to turn on the device. Otherwise, it'll turn on when just the on key is pressed, which means it could get turned on accidentally while in your bag or whatever and use up your power, which is not a problem for the Neo. But it is kind of a problem for the Dana. So, and you can set them both up to turn off automatically after a certain period of inactivity. But if it's being jostled around in a bag to the extent that it would accidentally turn on, then it's probably going to happen more than once. And you could pull out your Dana and find out that you don't have that much power left. So it's an easy setting to change. So 22 hours, getting back to the Dana, we get about 20 to 22 hours of battery life, and we can recharge it by a USB power bank, right? So you don't need an outlet. You could do the Dana for a long time as long as you have a USB power bank with you. Now the Neo, I'm not even going to mention the power. I'm going to mention the power once, and then we're going to leave it be because it doesn't matter. The Neo runs on 3 AA batteries for 700 hours. I did not stutter. So basically, you need to change the batteries in your Neo if you're using it every day, once a year. That's incredible, right? Now, the Dana will also run on 3 AA batteries, but obviously now you're starting to creep into that 20-hour, time. But and it has an insatiable appetite for batteries. So it used to come with a rechargeable battery pack. But now if you get a Dana, the odds are if you're lucky enough to get it to come with a rechargeable battery pack, that battery pack's no good. Right? But if you can take that battery pack to some place like Batteries Plus or, some electronics store, they can rebuild the pack for you using, modern rechargeable batteries, and then you're good to go. If you don't have somewhere like that and you're not afraid of doing a little wire splicing, look up the Vance Fry battery hack for the Alphasmart Dana. And I did this, and you can just recharge the Dana on the go with a power bank. It backups locally to SD cards. All those Neo workarounds I talked about plugging it into your phone and backing up to the cloud using your phone, they work on the Dana too. So, and the Dana has a backlit screen, right? Which the Neo does not. And the Dana has wireless capability, which the Neo does not. So it sounds like the Dana is our final device for distraction-free writing. Not so fast, right? So the Dana's backlit screen is so dim, it only really works in pitch darkness. And then it's like a glow stick. It's like a greenish backlit screen. It works, but it has to be really, really pitch black, and you can't see the keyboard at all, so I hope you're a touch typist. And the Wi-Fi capability that it has, well, it works, but it's completely unsecured and it dates to 2004. So good luck connecting it to a modern router. It's just not. So it's basically might as well not have wireless. Um, so, but that's not the biggest drawback of the Dana. The biggest drawback of the Dana is that it runs on Palm OS. Now, Palm OS is what used to run before we had smartphones. We had Palm Pilots, right? And they were kind of like a BlackBerry kind of device, a planner kind of device that was an electronic planner, and they worked really, really well. And you could write on it using a kind of proprietary script that they had to do shortcuts and everything like that for data input. And they were really slick. And I had a couple of them and I used them every day, but I used them as a planner, right? So the Dana runs on Palm OS. So that means that if you're going to go to use the Dana, at least for its initial configuration, you need to be willing to mess with Palm OS and defunct drivers. And for most people, that's a deal breaker. Despite the Dana's ability to save locally to an SD card. For me, the Dana is my travel solution, but I'm not afraid to break out an old soldering iron. And I had a couple Palm Pilots back in the day, so I was used to like messing around with the OS. And again, I am super paranoid about losing work, so I need it to have backup upon backup upon backup. For everyone else, the device I actually recommend is a Neo or a Neo 2. It's dirt cheap, and it works really, really well. Now, there's two other devices that I'm going to talk about. But first, I want to go back and talk about the alpha waves and theta waves, that brain state, that deep immersion writing. That kind of mindset that works best on the reader if the writer is in that mindset themselves, right? So every time as a writer that you stop to go back and edit a word, you are messing with your creative side. The same when you stop to look up some detail, or if you're writing and you have an idea, don't stop to look it up. Don't stop to go back and make the edit. Keep going forward. And this is one of those mental tools that I want to talk about, to just go, this is how you keep driving forward and maintain that alpha state without editing, without going back to, I just had a thought. Let me go back and find that passage and insert this paragraph here. So when I have those kind of thoughts when I'm writing, because you will, I insert those kinds of notes to myself using 2 hashtags. And so when you export it, whatever method you use to export it, it's really easy to find because double hashtags hardly show up in anything, right? For any other reason. So you can just do a find double hashtag and it'll take you through the entire document to all your notes. So in practice, it works like this, right? Bond saw his target at the baccarat table. Without thinking, his hand reached for his hashtag. What kind of pistol does Bond use again? Hashtag. Because when I'm done writing, I can go back and find that hashtag and then look it up and go, it's a Walther, right? But I don't have to do it right then. Don't interrupt your flow. Just write that note to yourself and then just keep going. So if I think of a correction or something that needs, I keep going forward though. But in practice, it works like this. Pandemonium broke out in the casino in the aftermath of Bond's attacks. Hashtag. Go back before this and add that Vesper and Felix are in the casino too. Hashtag. And that way I can keep going forward. It's just a quick note to myself. I don't interrupt the flow. I don't interrupt that alpha state, and I just press on. Now to get back to the last 2 devices I want to talk about. These are somewhat controversial, namely because of their price, right? It's a device, both of them, they make it very difficult to go back and edit, like extremely difficult, almost impossible if you have the older models. Um, all you can do on the older models is backspace. That's it. You have to go forward. You can only go forward. And they are a form of digital typewriter. And the two that I'm going to talk about are the Astrohaus Freewrite and the Freewrite Traveler. Now, I don't have the Traveler, and for reasons I'll explain later, I'm really not inclined to get one, at least not yet. But I made some short story sales, and I wanted to treat myself and check this thing out. So I got like the limited edition Hemingwrite, which was a Hemingway branded Freewrite. Now, the number one drawback to the Freewrites is they are expensive. For the price that you could buy one of these, you could buy a good laptop. For the price of the Hemingwrite, I might have been able to buy an Alienware gamer laptop. Like, it was really expensive. But I just crossed the 100,000 word threshold. I just finished. I've written several short stories on it, and I just finished my first novel written entirely on the Freewrite. The results can't be beat. It's I get into that zone, that alpha and theta state we've been talking about. I just stay there, right? Sometimes I swear I don't even see the device anymore. It just disappears, and I'm aware that I'm typing, but it's just gone. It's kind of hard to explain. The Freewrite devices connect seamlessly to the cloud and save constantly. They can email you your work, and through their management software, which is called Postbox, they can link with Dropbox or to Google Drive. And I think Evernote too. There's like a third one out there. And as I record this, the newest version of both devices offer a limited editing capability. But I'll tell you right now, I don't want it. Like, I can understand why other people would want it. But again, what we were just talking about, you don't want to go back and add stuff. Oh, let me jot back, 4 or 5 paragraphs and add that Vesper and Felix are in the casino too. Just jot that note. When you're editing, you can go back and put that in there. The Freewrite looks like a steampunk typewriter. Sports a full-size mechanical keyboard with brown switches, and it's a dream to write on, frankly. It's the best keyboard I've ever written on. Now, some younger than Gen X people, you guys might not like it because mechanical keyboards are real loud and real clacky. Also, the Freewrite, it's about as portable as a typewriter. Not very portable. This is not a device you're going to take to the local Starbucks to jot things down. It's not made for that. You know what I mean? It doesn't weigh that much. I think it's only about 3 or 4 pounds, but it is clunky. As clunky as a typewriter. Now, both devices use e-ink screens. The Freewrite's is front lit, and the Traveler's is not. And that maximizes battery life, though. They get really good battery life. I don't know how long it is, but I think they boast on their website that if you use it for half an hour a day, it will last a month without recharge, which is pretty good. I've never gotten to that point, but I write for more than a half an hour a day. I have gotten to the point where it says, hey, low battery, and I just plug it in through the USB-C connector and don't worry about it. But that also means that you can charge it and via the right USB power bank, right? Because it's USB to USB-C. Now, that power bank is gonna need to have a beefy charge, and with the Freewrite, I've run into something where only certain USB-C cables work. And I don't exactly know why. It seems to have no rhyme or reason. And if you want to experience what it's like to write on them without going back to edit, they have a web app called Sprinter. It is at getfreewrite.com. So it's sprinter.getfreewrite.com. I think that's the thing. I'll put the link in the show notes. I absolutely adore the Hemingwrite. Why am I not getting the Traveler? Well, price. These device, I think the Freewrite is around $450 for the Freewrite Traveler, right? And the Freewrite is 600 something, right? So they are really expensive. You could get, like I said, a decent laptop for this. Um, so the Traveler right now for me, and I know authors out there that swear by the Traveler. They adore it, and they've written entire novels and series on them, right? So the Traveler has more of the laptop kind of feel, right? Um, as far as the keyboards go and everything, the keys are not super clacky. They're more what you'd be used to with a laptop experience, except that it has an e-ink screen. Now, the e-ink screen does create some lag because everyone I know who's using either version of Freewrite can type faster than the screen will refresh. But I have found that I don't notice it after about, I don't know, a minute of writing on it. It's just gone because I'm not really reading what I'm writing. I'm just using the screen to confirm that yes, it's still taking in data, but it'll usually be about a word behind where I'm at as far as typing goes. Now, the Traveler does not have the front-lit e-ink screen, and the drawback for both of them is neither Freewrite device can save files locally externally unless it's hooked up to a computer. So I really, really wish that I could save to a thumb drive or an SD card. That would be absolutely ideal. You know, um, if I had that, if the Freewrite had that SD card backup, or I could back up to a thumb drive, um, in addition to the Postbox Cloud solution, cloud backup, I would buy it right now. Like that's how much I like these Freewrite devices. But I can't really justify buying the Freewrite Traveler when my modified Dana gives me an 80% solution, right? On that. Now, um, the Traveler, I'm really looking forward to a Traveler 2.0 that has a front lit e-ink screen and hopefully a way to save locally other than hooking it up to a computer. That I can just dump out my files to an SD card or a USB drive. That would be 100% ideal. So to kind of wrap this up, I've described a bunch of different devices. And my number one recommendation before we go into the last part is the Dana for me is my solution because I've hacked it, right? And I'm not afraid of iOS, and it's portable and it's robust. I mean, the Alphasmarts were built so grade school kids used them, so they're hard to bust, they're hard to break. So the Wi-Fi doesn't work, but I have solutions, I have workarounds, I have all this different stuff. The one device that fits all our criteria, though, is kind of the Alphasmart Neo. And you can use the hacks, the keyboard mods and everything to enable backup to the cloud via your smartphone if you really have to have it. I've found that the data retention on the Neo is pretty good, and it does have an internal battery so that once you get a Neo, you may want to pop it open. There are YouTube videos out there on how to change that internal watch battery that keeps the memory alive even if it doesn't have power. You probably want to do that because those batteries are probably all no good either. So that would be the two things I would recommend: is pick up a Neo, change out that battery, and then turn on that option for the 2-button option, and it'll do whatever. And then for my money, when I'm not traveling, I want to use my Hemingwrite. It is completely worth it in my mind. I know that the price point will probably scare a lot of people away, but it is ideal. So to close this up, a kind of part 3, I would say, right, is if I was king for the day or CEO for the day, or Elon Musk asked me, "Hey, Mike, I'll design whatever you want. Like, get me the. I want to hear your thoughts on the perfect writing device, um, for distraction-free writing." I would go, okay, so none of the devices out there right now quite fit all our criteria. They come close, some closer than others, but they don't quite hold. So no holds barred. This is what I want in a distraction-free writing tool that will enable deep immersion, right? So battery life. I don't want to have to think about charging or recharging or anything for at least like a week, right? I just want to be able to sit down when I write, when I want to write. I don't need to worry about plugging this thing in and waiting for it to charge or any of that nonsense. So it's got to have good battery life. The price ideally would be under $300. I would like it to be cheaper than that, but we have to be kind of realistic, right? So under $300 is a good target price for me. I would like it to have an e-ink screen so that I could use it outdoors in the sun. I could use it under harsh lighting, but that e-ink screen has to be I don't know what word I just said, but that screen has to be like front lit. I need to be able to use this device in low light. So it doesn't have to be e-ink particularly, but I would prefer it to be. But it needs to be able to be used in low light. So as long as we're talking about low light, if you're not going to give me a mechanical keyboard, I want a backlit scissor switch keyboard, right? As good as a ThinkPad's, right? But backlit so that I can use it in the dark. And although I am a touch typist, I don't need to be, So if I want to look down at the lights to confirm what key I'm hitting, I can do that. I need it to be robust. I need it to be rugged. I need to know that I can throw this thing into a backpack or a purse or something, or satchel, if you're going to be more manly about it and not have to worry about this thing getting knocked about and all of a sudden getting broke. I need to know that I don't need a special case to carry this thing. It needs to have a Wi-Fi cloud backup. It doesn't need necessarily to have Wi-Fi to surf the internet. It can go to, but it needs to be able to back up to any of the major services, right? OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever. It needs to be able to back up to the cloud somewhere without me having to interfere with it. Like, just seamless. And it also needs, biggie for me, ability to save or backup work locally on an external source, like a thumb drive, right? And then I just had a thought. Did I just describe a laptop? So, to wrap this up, I have started a project where I have bought a ThinkPad Lenovo S1 Yoga 12. Now, it dates back to 2014. I picked it up for $79 on eBay. The battery life is frankly atrocious. I think it's like 6 hours. But I haven't received it yet. The cool thing about using the Lenovo Yoga is that it is a ThinkPad. So it has that Lenovo ThinkPad keyboard that we were talking about. That is one of the best keyboards out there for a laptop. But because it's a Yoga, it also can flip around, be used as a tablet. And with the correct stylus, you can write longhand on it and it can back it up. I was like, holy smokes, except for the power. Do we have a solution here finally? And unfortunately, it hasn't arrived here yet. So I can't comment on it. I'll have to put out a QFD addendum to let you all know about my adventures with my ThinkPad Yoga 12 that's ancient, that I picked up for $79 on eBay and let you know how that works. I literally just bought this because I wanted to tinker with it, and it's a project. I have my writing solutions already in my Dana and in my Alphasmart, or not the Alphasmart, the Astrohaus Freewrite. Those are the two things that I use to write, at least to draft on. And then editing, I port everything into a computer, and I use Windows Word, not Mac Word, because Windows Word, it feels, Windows Word is more robust and has more features. Mac Word is kind of neutered. That's the way I feel. So anyway, I will give you guys updates on this when I finally get it in my grubby little hands, and see if we can come up with something that comes closer to that ideal writing solution. And meanwhile, I'll just keep checking, Astrohaus's website for some kind of Freewrite Traveler 2.0 that will have all the features that I want. And that's it for now. Mike out. You have been listening to Quantum Froth Dispatches by Michael Haspel. Music and other cues are brought to you by The Fat Rat. The song you are hearing is Monody, featuring Laura Brehm. Thank you for listening, and we now return you to your mundane reality.